Sit down, sister. You okay? Yeah.
Let us gather. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, and welcome to those of you joining us on our live stream. Before we begin our service, I invite you to listen deeply to the prelude, which will be played on our Holbrook Tracker organ. Our organ can be played so beautifully today because of Anne. We are here this afternoon to remember and memorialize a dear and generous life. We come together to say goodbye to Anne MacAdam. And today we are not walking alone in our grief and loss. We are bearing it together. But we have also gathered to celebrate a life, to be the gentle hands that prepare a dear soul for the journey into the unknown, warmed by our memories of her. We have come together to give thanks that we knew this amazing woman, to express gratitude for the days and years we were able to share with her. We are here to share the joy and remarkable authenticity that Anne brought to our lives, and to celebrate her presence that remains with us even now as we hold up the memories that will remain with us always. I thank you for being here today. It is tradition in Unitarian Universalist churches to light a chalice at the beginning of each service. And so this afternoon I invite Anne's daughter Heather to light our chalice for us.
I have an email from my uncle, Anne's, oops, sorry. There we go.
Sorry. I have an email from my Uncle Bruce, who was Anne's sibling, brother, and I wanted to share that. So this is what he writes. I've been wondering why the invitation, the painting, is so heartbreakingly right. Any serious artist eventually finds forms that matter to them, that create a feeling that accords with how they sense life. This bird, it's not just a stylized gull with no bones in its curving wings in that sky. It is a direct message from Anne's sensibilities to us. I can't even write this without crying. If Anne could be saying goodbye, this painting might be it.
Thank you. I'm so glad that we are memorializing Anne in this space, the sanctuary of the Unitarian Universalist Meetinghouse of Provincetown, because Anne's fingerprints are everywhere. Not just in her favorite pew, but on the walls, the elevator, the organ. Anne oversaw the restoration of the trompe-l'oeil and the Holbrook Tracker organ, designed our lift, our accessible bathroom, and so much more. You'll hear more about this later. But her fingerprints are on our community, too. I considered Anne to be the matriarch of this church. She had such a presence. Everyone was awed by Anne. As a nominating committee member, Anne used to make these incredible charts to keep track of our board of directors and their term limits. You should have seen them. They could only have been designed by an engineer, which of course she was. An automotive designer, a painter, a patron of the arts, a friend, a parent. Every June, when I invited all fathers to stand to be honored on Father's Day, Anne would be the first to stand up. She loved her children and treasured her relationship with Heather especially, which remained a father-daughter relationship. I visited Anne at her home on Pilgrim Heights Road a few years before she moved to Seashore Point. music was playing. The birds were dancing around the feeders just outside the window. And the table was perfectly laid, everything in its place. I did wonder if she had used a T-square on the cutlery.
Definitely.
And she made me the most perfect and precise omelet I have ever had. We talked about everything, the church, her childhood and family, her brothers, her kids, the artwork all around us. I treasured my visits with Anne. In more recent years, even as she lost her word retrieval and conversations became hard, I still enjoyed visiting with Anne. During the pandemic, once visitors were allowed at Seashore Point again, I would bring my laptop computer and call up our latest virtual worship service to show her. She especially loved the music. Somehow, after watching and listening, she would find the words. Amazing, stunning, beautiful, yes. If there was ever a part of the service that she didn't like, she would say, interesting. Anne did not give faint praise. It was against her nature. She had exacting standards for herself more than anyone. But if she thought you were doing a good job, she would tell you. And if you could make her laugh, well then, all the reward you needed was that momentary eruption and the smile that completely transformed her face. In my ministry over the last 10 years, there was no greater reward than that smile. It meant a great deal to me to always have her support, because I felt I was meeting a very high bar. I visited Anne the day before she died. I told her we loved her and that we would all be okay. I think we will be. It was time for her to go, to be released from what had become a life unworthy of her high standards. And I will miss her. I invite Anne's daughter Heather to offer her remembrance now.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm coming to remember my dad, Anne. I feel a little lost at words, which is odd since I'm a writer. As the only blood relative here today, I feel the burdens of remembrance, just as I felt the burden of a carer last fall. But I wasn't alone last fall. I had dear friends, Reverend Kate, Lawrence, Jane, Miriam, everybody at Seashore Point, my husband. It was tough, and I depended on the community here. I depended on nappies, ginger teenies, the Red Inn. Yeah, I just everybody, and Liz's Cafe, of course. I have a great family here. And that's what I sort of wanted to just say, that Family isn't limited to those we are physically related to. Anne discovered that when she came to Provincetown in the 80s. Family is made up of those we meet on this journey of life. And I want to acknowledge not only Anne's friends, but her surrogate family, her children, her personal family in Provincetown, in the UU, who subsequently have become my personal family. I mean, I feel, just incredibly close to all of you, and I'm so grateful to who you were in my dad's life. I also want to acknowledge my personal family, my surrogate sisters and brothers. My personal family, several who are here today, helped me through the tough times of last year and were even here with me in Provincetown when Anne and I reconciled at the Berta Walker Gallery in 2000. And I will give a shout out to Berta right now, who is recovering from COVID. I'm very sad that she can't be here. So instead of feeling alone today, I feel surrounded and supported by this large extended family, Anne's and mine. I'm very grateful that we're streaming this memorial to the MacAdam family so that my brother Locke and Anne's brother Bruce can participate. My cousins in Delaware and California, and my extended family in Utah and England are sharing in this send-off. I'm sad that you aren't here to feel this very genuine outpouring of love in this room. A genuine outpouring for my complicated dad, who loved us all very dearly. Our service today pays tribute to Anne's passions, art and music. And I just want to say that Michael just told me, our organist, that he would come here and play the Holberg organ during COVID, and it was just a gift. And he's very, very touched to be here because the Holberg organ was able to be played because of Anne's work in getting it renovated. I thought that was just beautiful. He said it kept him sane during COVID. And music kept my dad sane. In the 1960s, after working 10 or 12 hours in corporate America, my dad would come home from work and make a beeline for the Steinway in our living room and play a tumultuous classical repertoire to boil off the flotsam of a grueling day at work. I love to lie under that piano and soak up the vibrations, something many of you do in church here on Sundays. Our family always ate dinner late so we could eat as a family. But I was the only one who would get Dad to stop playing the piano. When my mother whispered that dinner was ready, I had to be very quiet when Dad was playing. I would stand very quietly by the piano and wait. Sometimes I waited a really long time for the playing to stop. It was a kind of a Zen practice for 6-year-olds, and it taught me how to listen. There was so much more going on behind the music. In those years, it was music that kept my dad sane until she was able to paint again. That is when most of you met Anne, when she was happy and whole and a painter and herself. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. I now invite Jonathan, Anne's friend and surrogate son, to share his remembrance.
Thank you, Heather, for those incredibly beautiful words, and welcome to all the MacAdam's family and friends, and Simon. It's been great to meet you and have you here. And thank you, Reverend Kate, for opening up this masterpiece of a building for all of us to share, and our love for Anne. So it was the summer of 1989, and I had rented 606 Commercial Street with 3 pals, as we did back in those days. It was the large yellow house that overlooked Suzanne Sineco's gardens, that's now designated by a town plaque as Suzanne's Gardens. You know, this showstopper of spectacular, ravishing cascade of wildflowers. And every day would appear a long, tall, limbering artist hidden behind her sunbonnet painting en plein air. And my friends and I would gaze for hours from the attic windows with this perfect view of an emerging masterpiece. And as young as we were, we all knew that we were witnessing a masterpiece in progress. And one day I finally got the courage to tread into the garden of Anne's earthly delights to introduce myself. And she was very cordial and charming and lovely. And I heard her signature MacAdam chuckle for the first time. And she invited me to the opening of Roberta Walker Gallery at the end of the month. And I just as a sidebar, I want to say that Anne's shows, her art shows in the late 80s and 90s were incredibly exciting events. The kind of art opening where the guests would line up before the doors were unlocked, and the kind of openings that every artist longs for. When you walk in, there's a red dot within 5 minutes on every painting. Her shows were all sensations. And of course, being a former New Yorker, I was the first at the door that time. And the first to say to Berta, I want a red dot on that painting I've been watching her do all summer. And I was really young, and I had no money. The money I had, I was going to buy a used car, but I put a red dot on, and when Anne came over, I said, you know, I really hesitate buying a painting with all the money I have in savings, because I really wanted to get a car. And without a beat in those beautiful sapphire eyes, she said, wise decision, because you only have to park a painting once. And that began really an enduring friendship in Provincetown. New Year's pajama brunches, flamboyant fireworks on the 4th, careening home arm in arm after too many margaritas later, kayaking across the bay to Long Point. Anne rode in this kind of stellar precision, symmetrically like a Swiss watch or shot from a cannon. And every summer there were the cranberry pancakes at Adrian's, and Anne always brought her own little flask of pure medicine. We shared a deep love of dance and personal histories of ballet. And we also shared, during a hilarious moment, I invited Anne to celebrate my birthday with me and Mike and our friends at Front Street. And she said, well, I was just going to ask you to celebrate my birthday with me and my friends at Front Street. And lo and behold, we discovered we were both born on the same day, which is tomorrow, May 23rd. And Gemini twins, and every year for years, we would celebrate our birthdays together, often at Front Street, and often careening home after too many Kir Royales later. A theme. I got to meet and befriend all of her wonderful, cheerful, fun-spirited pals who were all gone, but I really, to say their names here, and they were so important to Anne, especially in her first years in Provincetown. But Chester and Raphael, Jim Byard, who ran the Ashton House, Roz Garfield, the amazing Jay Beavers, who all of them just beautiful, colorful Provincetown personalities who just cherished Anne and their friendship. And 20 years ago, when Mike and I adopted our son Louis, Anne's gift to us was a pencil sketch of him every year for his first 5 years. And so we would spend the weekend at her house on Pilgrim Heights Road, and she got a little exasperated because she couldn't get Louis to sit still and pose for her. And one day he fell asleep. He used to put his finger upside down to the roof of his mouth, and he fell asleep on his belly with his butt in the air. And she said, I've got the sketch I want to do. And it's really so cute. I loved listening to her talk about her inspirations, and she often described her paintings like a blueprint or an architectural design. Pragmatically, without a lot of sentimentality, she looked for line, focal point, light, movement, what draws you in. She pointed out nuance and detail. About her painting, The Birches, she said, I just didn't want to make a painting of a bunch of trees. I wanted to make a painting of what trees do in me. And then she went on to say, the thing that really captured me about those birches were the branches, how they subdivide, how one becomes two, how two becomes four, four branches becomes eight, just like a capillary system. That's how she talked about her art. We also talked about the beautiful art in this town and the other painters and the gorgeous works hanging within so many important Provincetown public buildings, Pam and the library and town hall, even Siemens Bank. And there's a saying in 12-step programs, to keep it, you have to give it away. And because of our decades-long friendship with Anne and our immense respect of her as an artist, and her love and devotion to the Meetinghouse that Mike and Louis and I, with the help of Berta Walker, are really moved to donate as a gift to the Meetinghouse. We think one of Anne's most beautiful and radiant visions called Gliding. And now we can come every Sunday and see it and just say, hi, Anne, we miss you. Berta Walker said it so beautifully to me recently when we reminisced about our 35 years of knowing this bigger-than-life spirit, Anne, and seeing her determination and courage to find and experience herself physically, emotionally, spiritually, Anne. And as Berta said, Anne truly found her home here in Provincetown. Truly, as many of us do, truly, as many of us have. And I am forever grateful to live in a place where Anne and I and all of us who hear the call in our hearts, welcome home. So my husband, Mike, is going to read our little dedication, and our son, Louis, is going to take off the cover of the painting. So.
Gliding, oil on canvas, painted in 1990. This gift to the Universalist Unitarian Meetinghouse of Provincetown reflects the magical beauty, grace, vision, and poetic heart of the beloved and cherished UU member, an exquisite, transformative, bold artist, Anne MacAdam. In her many decades of integral involvement and service to strengthen and fortify the architectural masterpiece of our UU Meetinghouse, Anne led the campaign to restore and rededicate the Meetinghouse's grand old organ. The restoration of the treasured and nationally renowned trunk loyal interior, the refurbishment of the majestic steeple, and the annual concert series to benefit the preservation of the Meetinghouse. In the radiant and ravishing sea, sand dunes, and sunlight of the welcoming village of Provincetown, and the many deep, caring friendships within its vibrant, compassionate community, Anne found her home here. She found all the love that is the spirit of this Meetinghouse. Jonathan Scott, Michael McGill, and Louis McGill Scott, today, on the day before Anne's birthday.
Thank you. And wow. I now invite Anne's longtime friend Douglas to offer a remembrance.
As we co-named Bernie, I think it'd be not okay not to call her name Beth Skinner as well, and have her in this space. My transcendentalist friend would likely say to me, "Okay, Baptist minister, you only have 5 minutes. You're not delivering a sermon." It's how she mocked me. I've never been Baptist, but her ears always heard me as one. One of the gifts we received from this meeting house, this town in the late 80s and 90s, early 90s, was chance encounters and subsequent loving relationships with people whom we otherwise never would have met. Anne MacAdam was one of those people in my life. She inspired me. Her unparalleled courage to defy convention and be herself long before I ever met her. Her mind was still trapped with a wit both sardonic and soulful. Anne was intentional and particular about whom she allowed into her private life. So it was abundantly clear to me that the vetting process had begun when I received my first invitation to breakfast. Those breakfasts on a hill, either on Pilgrim Heights or at Adrian's in Truro, with Anne always bearing real maple syrup. They became a source of great comfort and security for me. They were usually fun. It was at one of those breakfasts that Anne gave me the dearest compliment I've ever received in my entire life. But they could also be serious. It was also at one of those breakfasts that she, and here I will add some Baptist flavor, the mother of our church, also ripped me up one side and down the other because she was infuriated with a decision that I, when president of this meeting house, and the board had made. But she didn't go behind my back or cut me loose. She invited me to her home, cooked applewood smoked bacon long before it was trendy, fed me and directly told me how upset she was. Her loyalty to this meeting house was as deep as any has ever been. She thought our decision had reflected poor judgment and resigned as the finance chair. I cannot be in the position of asking people to give money when I think we're not being good stewards of it. It drew us closer, with her always serving as wise counsel to me. No time is indelibly printed in my mind as a summer Sunday in the 90s, when this place was packed to the gills. We were without a minister at the time, and at the time of reflection on our guest minister's sermon, which I think might have been you, Bill Clerk, a woman stood up and began to speak, and speak, and speak. After about 5 minutes, I moved from my frozen state and crept up the center aisle to Anne's seat and asked, should I ask her to end her remarks? Without a moment's hesitation, she looked at me and said, somebody should, and tell her the next time she wants to deliver a thesis, she can tack it to the door. That happened. In 1997, I left for graduate school in Boston. One day my phone rang and it was Anne informing me that she was heading into Boston in the next couple of weeks and wanted to arrange a time for us to have dinner. We met at one of her favorite spots on Newberry Street and had a wonderful evening of laughter and catching up. At some point, my heart was filled, and I said to her, I feel like a kid who's gone off to school and his mom has come to check on him. As she sometimes did for emphasis, she said nothing. She just gave me a knowing look, flashed a twinkle in those blue eyes, and smiled. And she was proud of us, Bill, and referred to us as kids who had left town and left the meeting house and gone on to do good in the world. My heart is broken, and life in the village will be a little less bright because Anne no longer resides in it. But let us rejoice that her brilliant mind is once again set free, and let us be grateful that the lessons she taught us will live on. The lessons of responsibility, commitment, integrity, a well-placed sarcastic remark, and sparse, but oh so sincere compliments. She called me preacher, but Anne's life was a sermon worth heeding.
Thank you. I now invite Lawrence to share his remembrance of Anne.
My walk with Anne. Well, we both came from Michigan. She came a couple of years before I did. I came in '95. And she worked for Chrysler, and I worked for the UAW. So she was in charge of about 400 people. I was president of our office workers local union, and I was responsible for 400 over the United States and Canada. She designed and built her home. I designed and built my home. I did the same, so our lives paralleled each other all the time. Then I remember walking into the UU on 95, alone, not knowing anyone. Then I saw Anne, and I said to myself, my people. After and during coffee hour, I tried saying hello to her, but she wouldn't have any part of it. As one of you said, she was very particular about her. We were meant to be friends in spite of her challenge. I finally got to talk to her at one of Chester Solomon's dinners. When I walked up those stairs to the kitchen area and the living room area, she looked and like, what are you doing here? We had a budding friendship after that. She later decided to change her diet and asked me a lot of questions about eating more healthy. So I said, why don't you come over for dinner sometime? I will teach you about veggie foods. She came over and I had her, she said, oh, I want to help. I said, okay. Why don't you cut these carrots? Well, each carrot had to be cut and measured at the same time, just like every blade of grass in her paintings. She took such a long time to fix dinner. The next time she came over for dinner, I had all the veggies already cut. We had dinner many times, but the last time she came over, she told me, I can't come over anymore. And I said, okay, what did I do? She said, no. She said, she said it was very painful for her to come in my home because it reminded her of leaving her home and the home she loved so much. I think at that time is when Anne started to fail, when she left her home and went to Seashore Point. So Anne and I, we will always be together, whether you like it or not.
Thank you, Lawrence. Miriam was Anne's caregiver at Seashore Point, and I offer my deep gratitude for her amazing and steadfast love for Anne, and invite her to share her remembrance now.
Hello, so my name is Miriam. So I met Anne, and can everybody hear with the mask? Okay, I broke my ankle, so and I met Anne in, of course, Seashore Point in the dining room. She's have a dinner with Bruce, my son, for so many months. When Bruce come to see her, they have a dinner together, and I walk and look at her, and she gives me always a beautiful smile. I think with connection, I feel so good when I see her. And then after this, I think months or a year after this, I start take care of her because I do home HHA in Seashore Point. I used to go to her apartment and make a breakfast. And she loved the breakfast. The beginning, she said, "No, you sit down, I'll make for you." I said, "Yeah, no, I'm here to help you." "Oh, no. Okay, let's go do it together." And then the beginning I was trying to do it together, then I think she accepted me to do by myself. And she's always, she has a beautiful smile. And she's beautiful, right? I love to look at her, their eyes and so, and then she loved breakfast. Lunch was a little bit, and dinner come for the kitchen, she's not much. And loves sweets. She always had a say, give a sweet for later. But she looks, have a sweet. And one day she started doing the PT, rehab. She has to go to rehab. And she went to go. "Hey, you have to go. Let's go take some walk." And then she said, I think, okay. And let's go out for lunch or some restaurant. Oh, she loves going to the restaurant. And I have to say that to go to the lunch, she don't want to go to rehab. And this was amazing. Let's go to rehab. Let's go to the restaurant. This is the only way she walked and go with me to rehab. And then she forgot. She's okay. Now we move. She tried to go straight to go out. No, let's go take a ride. And then she sit and I smile for everybody and sit and start with the PT. It always a pleasure be with her. And really, we have a good days. Of course, we have bad days. Had a lot and her husband. But we have a good time. And she loves the classic music. And she talked to me about the painting, the beginning. And I listen, and she's smart, and I really appreciate it. And I was with Annie one night before she died, the same day, right? And I sit next to her, and she just, sleeping, and she's not always there. And I say, Annie, please, it's time to go. I say this, it's time to go. And the next day, my coworker called me and she passed away. I said, she's in peace now. Yeah. Sorry, I don't wrote anything. It's just looking from my heart.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you. Now, Voyager, lay here your dazzled head. Come back to earth from air, be nourished. Not with that light on light, but with this bread. Here close to the earth be cherished, mortal heart. Hold your way deep as roots push rocks apart, to bring the spurt of green up from the dark. Where music thundered, let the mind be still. Where the will triumphed, let there be no will. What light revealed, now let the dark fulfill. Here, close to the earth, the deeper pulse is stirred. Here, where no wings rush and no sudden bird, but only heartbeat upon beat is heard. Here, let the fiery burden all be spilled, the passionate voice at last be calmed and stilled, and the long yearning of the blood fulfilled. Now, voyager, come home to rest. Here on the long-lost country of Earth's breast, lay down the fiery vision and be blessed. Be blessed. May Sarin. Each of you are here to offer thanks for Anne's life and to let go of her body while holding on to her memory. She loved this community deeply, her chosen family, the place where she could be her true self. You made that possible for her. And I know that you have many stories of her. If you are moved to do so, we invite you to come forward and share just a few words about Anne.
Hi, Doug. My name is my name is Bernadette Ames. Most people call me Bernie. I first heard the name Anne MacAdam during my first visit to Provincetown a long time ago. Gallery hopping brought me to Berta Walker's before she moved to the East End. The first thing I saw stunned me with its gorgeous colors and precise detail. It was as though the flowers in it had been transported to the gallery and made even more beautiful by the presentation. The painting was The Gardens of Susan Senego, and I wanted it. So did many others, and besides, it was out of the reach of my teacher's salary. Years later, in 1997, I met Anne at a UU service, my first time in attendance. My partner, eventually my wife, Beth Skinner, and I sat behind her in just about where you were, and also with John Drews and Chester Solomon. When Anne turned around during the meet and greet moment, her blue eyes twinkling and her nose crinkled up with a welcoming smile, I just felt immediately as though I belonged in this place. John, knowing that I was a wash-ashore, asked where I was from, a common enough question. But what he asked next was a bit strange, I thought. After I told him my hometown was Toledo, Ohio, he asked what high school I had attended. At that moment, synchronicity and serendipity collided and merged as John told me that he had graduated from the same high school 10 years before me. Can you believe that? And at that time, I knew I was home. During the years that followed, Beth and I enjoyed Anne's company and occasional get-togethers and dinners at Nampy's. After Beth's death in 2010, Anne's kindness and empathy helped ease me over the rough times. Invitations to share events such as exhibits at the Boston Museum of Art, a Metropolitan Opera on the big screen in Wellfleet, occasional movies and dinners, and her homemade from scratch buckwheat pancake breakfasts with real maple syrup were greatly enjoyed and appreciated. I'd like to mention one more example of Anne's kindness. We have to skip back about 15 years or so to the time when Anne had another exhibit at Berta's, this time in the East End. Beth fell in love with one of Anne's paintings of a gull, dramatically flying solo out above the ocean. Anne had spent countless hours examining what she called roadkill in an effort to understand the structure of the birds. Yeah, it paid off, for the bird is amazingly lifelike. Being the perfectionist that she was, Anne also spent hours getting the waves hitting the shore just right. She told us that she had redone the shoreline 13 times until she was satisfied. Beth was convinced that Anne's girlfriend belonged in North Truro. She said it reminded her of the freedom she felt many years ago when she was piloting her airplane. The only problem was that a representative from a California bank had already claimed it. So Anne did the only thing that Anne could have done. She convinced the rep that a different painting would be even better to take home. This was typical of Anne's kindness. Now, whenever I look at the painting, I think not only of Beth's freedom, but Anne's freedom as well. I appreciated all your remarks. They were just so spot on. Anne was a wonderful, wonderful person.
I knew Anne for 35 years. We saw each other through quite a lot. She was my friend and my advisor, and I'd like to believe that I was the same for her. Anne was fierce, opinionated, harsh, and over-the-top organized. She loved that maple syrup, and she would never let you stack her plates after dinner because that meant you had to wash both sides of the plate. She was open and thoughtful beyond measure. We butted heads quite a few times, but she was always ready to hear my side with respect and true consideration. Sometimes we ended on the same page, sometimes not. The thing I've always said about Anne is that she had the most integrity of anyone I have ever known. She never did one thing in her life without great deliberation. I loved her. I look around this building and I am unable to separate Anne from it. This was one of her great loves. And then I wrote a lot about what she did, but we've already gone over that. So I just want to say this very building owes so much to Anne MacAdam. I feel her everywhere I turn. I loved Anne and will always feel blessed to have known her. I treasure, or as Anne would say, treasure. One of our last visits I had with her up at the Wellness Center. She held my hand in both of hers and merely said, "Love, love, love." Yes, Anne, love. Rest in peace and in beauty.
My name is Bruce de Saint Croix, and I'm actually one of the younger friends of Anne out of the crowd here, and you've all described everything that I ever knew and cherished about Anne. I think that she first invited me to a dinner because I knew Douglas and Bill and Jane, and it surprised me. Back a few years ago, I became president of the Meetinghouse, and I was for 8 years, and during that time, she was the matriarch, and she was a big part of my life. Last evening, I got home and was beginning to do some prep for dinner, and out of the corner of my left eye, on a window shelf, there were some vases and pots, and a little bit of green showed, and it was an amaryllis that had sat there for over 2 years with no water and no tending. When I walked into the Meetinghouse the first time we opened it again, after 2 years, out of the corner of my eye, I saw Anne sitting in her seat, upright, just like the sprout of the amaryllis. Over the years, we had many conversations and discussions, and like Jane said, Sometimes we agreed and sometimes we butted heads. But every year I treasured 4 words from Anne. I give 1 sermon a year for like the last 12 years, and I'd finish and walk down to the back and stand there. And Anne would come down the center aisle, straight at me, stare me in the eyes, and go, "Thank you, good job." So what I'd like to say is, Anne, thank you, good job.
Hi, I'm Marty Hassel, and I'm a new friend of Anne's. I only knew her for 25 years. And I was supposed to be singing in a concert today, which is going to prevent me from being at this service, which was upsetting me greatly. But one morning, and I was going back and forth between whether I should be here or be at the concert, and then one morning I woke up and clear as a bell I heard Anne saying, "Do your duty, Marty." So I'm like, okay, it's music, I'll go to the concert. Well, the concert's been canceled, so here I am. And just a few things. This tie I have on belonged to Chester Sullivan. When he died, I didn't know him very well, but he was a living, breathing angel. I mean, he just emanated light. So they had an estate sale. And I went to his house. I thought I just want one item that has his energy in it. And I looked at everything in the house and was like, no. And then I walked into an empty bedroom. And there was a closet door open and there was a hanger with 5 ties on it. I thought, that's it. So I thought he'd want to be here today, but that's why I got it. And Anne was always gracious to me and loving to me. She came to my 50th birthday where it wasn't just you people, it was people from Boston and people she didn't know. And I came into the living room and she was regaling everybody with something and was the life of the party. And ever since that birthday, she sent me a birthday card every year. So I'm really gonna miss her. She was, and oh yes, I had her address there too, so does that make me a member of the club? I don't know. And she also hosted a studio visit for my sister and my niece, both of whom are art collectors. And we went over there and she spent hours with us talking about her paintings and her process. And then she went over to one painting and she said, it was a huge painting with lots of trees. She said, "I've got to fix that tree right there." And that was telling who she was. But anyway, I'm very grateful to for having known her. And I'm going to miss her a lot. Thanks.
I knew Anne when I first came here. I was in divinity school. I was student minister to the Meetinghouse. And I remember Anne would always sit in that pew and she'd listen and she'd listen and she'd listen. And she'd again walk out, and it was always, she never complimented my tie. And that's because people always told me in divinity school, if people compliment your tie, they did not like your sermon. So she never complimented my tie, but she always liked my sermons. And we go out to lunch and we shared a faith tradition of Christian Science for a while, so we talked about that. And numerous dinners at places at her house. And she was on the search committee one time as we were looking for a minister. And I remember we met in her house. And somebody on the search committee put their feet up on her white furniture. That did not go well for that person at all. But she waited till she had left and said, "What kind of person puts their feet on a white chair?" But she was a delight, and as everyone said, I'm sorry, her fingerprints, I love you said that it's all over this sanctuary. I remember they were redoing the trompe-l'oeil, and we had to climb in through the scaffolding to worship together. But she was an amazing, amazing human being, and I love her dearly, and I will miss her. Thank you.
I have great memories of it. And, I met Anne when she first moved to town. When she first moved to Provincetown, Aubrey and Plumbing guys that had a store in town introduced me over to, invited me over to dinner at their house, and Anne was there. And she had just made the decision to move to Provincetown, I guess. And we got connected. It was very nice. And then I became a member of the board here, way back, with Anne. And the church was growing a lot. A lot of people were in town, a lot of people needed spirituality, and we were all here for that. And Anne would see something missing, and she'd come up and I'm going to fix that. She knew how to do everything. It was great. The other thing about Anne is I'm a hairdresser, so Anne needed the hair. And we had these sessions after my salon told us she would come over to come to the salon, and I would cut her wigs and make them fit for her and try to show her how to style the wigs, which she was not very good at. Didn't have that practice of growing up, making pin girls, so. But it was fun to deal with her. And when my partner from those days, Jeffrey, passed away, she gave me a beautiful charcoal drawing of Jeffrey that she'd done with the Art Association. So, deep memories. Thank you.
I wasn't going to say anything because Anne is one of the people who exemplified a life that we could only hope for in ourselves. She didn't speak about herself, but she lived herself. She was before her time, and every person I know who has gone through a transition, whatever it may be, I think of Anne. And particularly, there's the obvious, but age. She would not give in to thoughts of her age. And she skied until she could no longer ski, and I always thought that was so cool. She would get up on a ladder and fix a little thing up there when everyone of a certain age should not be on a ladder. So I loved how she broke all the rules while living within a circumscribed life.
Our last remembrance will be by John Thomas.
Hello, everybody. I want to say that not only did Anne spearhead the leadership for the restoration of the organ, it also included obtaining this piano. And those of you who were here before this piano just remember the one we had. It kind of looked like a piano that had been in a Wild West saloon for 30 years. So the purpose of that campaign was to get a concert-worthy organ and a piano. And she proceeded to make the platform, the choir risers, and the cover. Amazing. At the dedication of the concert, she was we were particular about this piano. No messing around with it. So I announced at the concert with everybody there. It's one time I got a good laugh out of her. I said, well, I'm playing a new piece. It's called Serenade for Prepared Piano and Maple Syrup. She looked astonished and burst out laughing. So, several years ago, she gave me a box of music. This piece I've been working on for 2 years, and it's still not ready to play. I'm not going to play it until she would approve. But instead, I'm going to play a piece by Schumann, which I think represents this painting and Anne's spirit. It's called Bird as Prophet from Forest Scenes.
Anne's family would like to invite you all to a reception following this service on the back porch at Seashore Point. There we can continue to share stories of Anne. There are details in today's order of service. We cherish the memory of Anne's words and deeds and character. Carrying her in our hearts, let us go now from this place in comfort and in peace, assured that even in this time of loss and sorrow, life remains precious and good. May we also on this day rekindle in our hearts an appreciation for the gifts and life of all of our family and friends. As you return to the routines of your lives, may an abiding peace go with you.